If I could speak to the girl I was at 9, I wouldn't try to comfort her. I'd just tell her what no one else ever did. You weren't greedy, Rachel. You were just hungry, and not just for food. It was the kind of dinner that from across the room might have looked normal. A quiet Tuesday, meatloaf on a cracked ceramic platter, canned peas glistening from too much butter, mashed potatoes with the top raked like garden lines. My dad Gerald folded his napkin 3 times before placing it on his lap. My mom Susan poured iced tea and added lemon only to my brother's glass. Noah was 11, 2 years older than me, and treated like he'd invented the alphabet. When I sat down, I noticed my setting was different. Noah had a full-set polished fork butter knife cloth napkin folded into a triangle. Mine was a white plastic spoon slightly warped from a dishwasher it was never meant to go through. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I reached toward the shared butter knife between us. Mom's hand snapped out like a mousetrap. She didn't shout, just pulled the knife away and set it beside Noah's plate. "You don't get the good forks," she said. "You eat like a dog." Noah smirked and took a bite of meatloaf like it was a victory. Dad didn't look up. My peas rolled off the spoon. The potatoes stuck to the plastic. I gave up and used my fingers. No one said a word. That night, I went to bed full of nothing. I closed my eyes and pictured a real plate, real silverware, something heavy warm, something meant for me. But even then, I knew better than to ask for it out loud. By the time I turned 10, I had stopped expecting fairness. I didn't cry when Noah got a full birthday party at the bowling alley and I got a cupcake with a candle that wouldn't stay lit. I didn't ask why my bath towel was always damp, already used, already cold. I just learned to dry myself faster. Noah had shelves of sneakers, bright white, barely worn. I had hand-me-down sandals that pinched and cracked. "You'll grow into them," Mom said. "Be grateful." That phrase was repeated so often it became like static in the walls. At 11, I placed second in the county spelling bee. The trophy was plastic, but I carried it home with both hands like it might melt. When I walked through the door, the house was dark. No one had come. Mom was watching TV folding towels. Dad was asleep. Noah didn't look up from his game. I stood there for a minute longer than I should have, just long enough to feel the sting settle into my chest. Then I went to my room and placed the trophy on a shelf that no one ever looked at. A few weeks later, I found an old family photo album on the bottom bookshelf. The first few pages were filled with birthdays, backyard cookouts, matching sweaters at Christmas. But I wasn't in any of them. Page after page, all Noah. There was one picture of a beach trip, and I saw myself finally standing to the side, holding a red bucket. But my face had been cut out, the jagged edge still visible. When I asked Mom, she didn't even turn her head. "You were there." Don't be dramatic. I stopped asking after that. I started observing instead. Like when Noah broke a neighbor's window with a baseball and Dad told the man I did it. "She needs to learn about consequences," he said. The man looked confused but nodded. I swept up the glass while Noah got a popsicle. I started to understand that I wasn't invisible. I was being edited out. I was 13 when I stopped asking permission to eat. That afternoon, I stayed late at school for tutoring. By the time I walked home, my stomach was twisting. The porch light was off, but the kitchen window glowed yellow. I smelled baked chicken cornbread and something sweet, maybe candied yams. The kind of meal I hadn't tasted in months. Inside the house was quiet. Plates sat stacked on the counter, still warm. I didn't think. I just moved. I found a small plate and served myself one drumstick, a spoonful of peas, a triangle of cornbread. I sat at the end of the table, not my usual spot, but farther from the hallway closer to the window. I picked up the fork metal, not plastic, and took a single bite of chicken. The door creaked. I froze. Mom stepped into the room. She looked at the plate, then at me. She didn't raise her voice, didn't ask questions. She walked across the floor in soft, deliberate steps, reached down, took my plate in both hands, and dropped everything into the trash. I didn't move. "You eat before your brother," she said, not even looking at me. "Dogs wait." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "You're not family." The fork hit the trash last. I heard the dull clink. A minute later, Noah walked in. Mom smiled like nothing had happened. She served him the same meal, chicken peas cornbread, on a real plate with a cloth napkin folded on the side. He never asked what I'd been eating, or why I was no longer at the table. I didn't cry that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, watching shadows crawl like insects across the plaster. Then I sat up, pulled out the spiral notebook from my backpack, and wrote one sentence on the first page. They only feed you when you stay small. I didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt true. I didn't leave after the plate. I didn't even stop helping with dishes. But something inside me shifted. I started living with the volume turned down, quieter, sharper, watching instead of asking, not because I was afraid, but because I'd finally learned the rules. Silence was the only language they didn't try to rewrite. At 14, I joined a free community cooking program hosted at the library. It was mostly older women and 2 teenage boys who just wanted to skip detention. I kept to myself. I didn't tell them my favorite thing to make. I didn't tell them I barely ate. That's where I met Gloria Mason. 63, retired chef hair in a silver twist held with a pencil. She ran the kitchen like a drill sergeant but never raised her voice. If you burned the onions, she made you start over. If you plated poorly, she made you serve it to yourself and eat every bite. One afternoon, I sliced my thumb open trying to debone a chicken. It wasn't deep, but I froze. Blood ran down my wrist. I waited for someone to yell. Gloria didn't. She wrapped my hand in a towel, handed me a cold soda, and said, "Sit." She didn't ask what happened. Not to my hand, not to the scar on my knuckle, not to the way I flinched when she moved too fast. 2 weeks later after class, she handed me a binder. "You don't have to open it now," she said. "But when you do, read the yellow tab first." Inside was a printout of emancipation guidelines, shelter information, names and numbers I didn't recognize. At the back, folded like a recipe card, was a sticky note with 5 words: "You deserve more than scraps." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But the tears stayed somewhere behind my ribs, quiet and thick. I nodded, folded the binder, and slipped it into my backpack. At home that night, no one asked where I'd been. Mom handed me a paper plate with boiled pasta and a spoon. I ate it in the laundry room. In the dark, I took out the binder again. I didn't read it. Just touched the sticky note. Just let the words sit there. I wasn't ready yet, but I was beginning to plan. By 15, my silence had a rhythm. I'd wake early, leave the house before anyone noticed, and return when the lights were already on. I told Mom I was volunteering for extra credit. She didn't ask where. As long as I didn't eat before Noah, I could come and go. I spent weekends at the community center helping Gloria prep for youth cooking nights. I diced, cleaned, kept my head down. Then I'd walk 3 blocks to the school library where the AV tech let me sit in on his podcast editing sessions. "You've got good ears," he said once. "You listen with your face." I didn't tell him that listening had been the only way to survive at home. I learned about sound, Fader's hiss background noise, how to scrub a voice until it sounded like it was floating in your head, how silence had weight if you left it in the right places. I also learned patterns. Dad Gerald left the house every Sunday at 6:45 p.m., said it was for church board meetings, but the church wasn't open that late. I followed once from a block behind. He met 2 men in boots and flannel behind the auto yard on Bell Street. I saw envelopes. I saw him laugh. I didn't care what he was doing. I cared that he lied so smoothly. Mom Susan kept PTA envelopes in a blue folder labeled Field Trip Funds. Sometimes I saw her take out 20s and slip them into her purse. Once she dropped a receipt, a pedicure, and a slice of lemon pie. Noah the Golden Child filmed TikToks about family dinner values while drinking vodka through a Slurpee straw. His girlfriend told him not to post one video because it made him look too fake. He posted it anyway. None of this surprised me, but I started keeping notes, not online paper only. I wrote each entry like a recipe. Mom skimming ingredients. 3. PTA events. 1 lemon pie, $60 missing. Dad board meetings, method lies flannel 1 envelope per Sunday. Noah spoiled, garnish fake smile, blue Slurpee brand deals pending. I recorded what I could. The old recorder from the AV room fit inside my hoodie. I tested it at home, caught Mom talking about using leftover bake sale cash for groceries again, and Dad yelling about someone at work who peed himself when he raised his voice. I didn't listen for fun. I listened for survival. That spring, I volunteered at a soup kitchen. Gloria got me the shift. I didn't say much, just cleaned trays, restocked bread. But I started to see the difference between hunger and cruelty. Hunger passes. Cruelty lingers, feeds itself, sharpens around quiet girls who don't ask for seconds. At home, the meals stayed the same. Noah got steak. I got pasta. Sometimes crackers. Once just ketchup on a paper napkin. I didn't react. I said thank you. Then I wrote it down. Every Sunday after the fake board meeting, I'd sit in my closet and transfer the audio files to a flash drive. I labeled them by tone. Not content. Tone. Flat, cold, casual, mocking, triumphant threat. They were ingredients. I didn't know what the final dish would be yet, but I was learning how to prepare it. Graduation came and went. Noah walked across the stage in a tailored suit holding a scholarship he'd barely earned. Mom cried. Dad shook hands with the principal like he built the school himself. I sat 5 rows back uninvited. When the ceremony ended, I left before they could pretend to notice me. That night, Noah got a car, a shiny used sedan with a bow on the hood. I got a text from Mom. Don't be late for dishes. I wasn't angry. I was done. I packed my things after midnight, not much one duffel the binder. Gloria gave me a small wooden box with my notebooks and a thumb drive. I left a note on the fridge. You threw away my plate. I set my own table. R. Then I walked out without making a sound. Gloria met me 2 blocks away, engine running, passenger door already open. She didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. We drove to the shelter's side house where a small cot and a clean towel were waiting. That night, I slept without flinching, but I wasn't finished. The next morning, I opened my laptop and uploaded the first and only episode of a podcast I'd been building for 6 months. It was called Leftover Daughter. No names, no locations, just my voice. Steady, low, patient. I told the story of a girl who grew up eating scraps while her brother dined like a king. A girl who learned to listen when speaking made her unsafe. A girl who learned how silence could record everything. The episode was 22 minutes, scored lightly with piano, edited down to nothing but clean sound and heavy truth. Then I mailed 3 envelopes. The first went to the school board inside audio of Mom joking about using field trip money to buy herself lunch. She laughed about it, laughed about poor kids with lunch debt. The second went to the church board, a clipped recording of Dad slurring over dinner. Rachel. She's nothing, barely human. I should have broken her jaw back then, teach her real quiet. The third went to Noah's brand partner, a flash drive with videos of underage drinking fake charity shoots, and a text thread where he laughed about bullying a classmate until she switched schools. I didn't expect fireworks. I expected silence. But the podcast started moving. 200 downloads, then 500, then 10,000. Then someone clipped one line and shared it to TikTok. When you feed a child scraps, she'll season her silence. It caught fire. People didn't know it was me. I never used my full name, never showed my face. But the story rang true for more people than I ever expected. Within a week, Noah's sponsors dropped him. Mom was quietly asked to step down from PTA. Dad, well, the church board called an emergency vote. He didn't even finish the meeting. They blamed online trolls, strangers, haters. They never looked my way. They didn't have to. The truth had its own voice, and it was louder than any of theirs ever was. It was a Tuesday when I saw the listing. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, fixer-upper, priced to move. No photos of the inside, but I didn't need them. I recognized the porch, the cracked railing, the sun-bleached number nailed above the door. It was my childhood home. I didn't celebrate. I didn't hesitate. I called Gloria. Her cousin worked at a nonprofit that helped youth aging out of unstable homes transition into first-time ownership. They had grant options, matching programs, and a short list of requirements. Steady work, purpose, proof that you knew what a house was and what it cost to keep one. I sent them the podcast. 48 hours later, the answer came back. approved. By the time I signed the papers, foreclosure notices had already gone out. Turns out when the PTA checks stopped coming, when Noah's brand deals dried up, and Dad's church duties were revoked, money ran tight. Too tight to keep the mortgage afloat. The house slipped through their fingers and landed in mine. Closing day came quiet. A beige afternoon. The lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks. Boxes sat near the curb, soggy from last night's rain. Mom stood by the mailbox on her phone. Noah paced, shouting at someone. Dad wasn't in sight. I stepped out of Gloria's car with the key in one hand and a clipboard in the other, wore a gray hoodie, kept my hair tied back. No makeup, no announcement. When they looked up, I saw it confusion first, then panic. "What are you doing here?" Mom asked, still gripping her phone. Noah stared, jaw slack. I didn't answer them. I walked past the porch steps I used to scrub with a toothbrush, past the window where my reflection never looked like it belonged, up to the door. I unlocked it. The key turned clean. Then I turned back and said calm and steady, I set the table this time. The door closed behind me. The silence was thick. I didn't peek through the blinds. I didn't listen to whether they stayed or left. I didn't care. Inside the walls looked smaller. The floors creaked the same. The smell bleach and old onions was still there. But it wasn't theirs anymore. That evening I didn't unpack much. Just one thing. A dining table. Heavy wood. Real grain. Paid with my own money. I placed 3 things on top. A copy of my broken hand's x-ray. A recorder still functional. And a nameplate that read, Rachel Carter Survivor, Not Guest. I didn't post photos, didn't tag anyone. The only audience that mattered was the air inside that house and the memory of the girl who once whispered to herself just to feel heard. I didn't need them to see me win. I just needed them to see me own the place they tried to erase me from. 3 days after I moved in, I hosted my first dinner. No announcements, no posts, no family. Just 6 chairs. 1 for me. The rest for people who knew my name without having to be reminded. Gloria came early, arms full of groceries. "I brought real butter," she said, "the kind that leaves a mark." We cooked in silence, the good kind, sizzling pans, low music, windows open. The house didn't echo anymore. The guests arrived quietly. A girl from the shelter who once gave me half her sandwich without asking why I hadn't eaten. A teacher who let me nap in the back row during midterms instead of marking me late. The AV tech from school. A neighbor who once returned my notebook with a note, "You write like you're remembering something no one else lived." We set the table together. No plastic. No paper napkins. Just plates full warm even. No one waited. No one asked who deserved what. Every plate held the same thing, a seared steak, mashed potatoes, peach slices in chilled glass bowls. I didn't make a speech. I just watched them eat, watched the way no one looked over their shoulder. No one flinched when reaching for salt. When I passed the last plate to Gloria, she looked at me and asked, "Why come back here, Rachel?" I smiled. "This place used to be a prison," I said, but I turned the locks around. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked the hallway in socks. The same floor that once creaked under fear now felt steady. The mirror by the entry still had a crack in the corner. I stood in front of it, touched the scar on my hand, watched how my fingers moved, bent slightly wrong but steady. They worked. They typed the truth. They set the table. And when I looked at my reflection, just me, no shadow behind, I didn't feel small. I felt full. If you were ever told to wait your turn and it never came, just leave a single dot.